So much hatred and violence and killing in the streets. All across the world, good people with nothing, no food to eat, no. Oh, let's come together, let's come together. Right now, right here today. Every brother and sister, oh, let me hear you say, let me hear you say, come on. Let's make tomorrow, oh, better than today. Let's make tomorrow, oh, better than today. Better, no. Let's make tomorrow, oh, better than today. Better, make it better. Let's make tomorrow, oh, better than today. And let's make tomorrow, oh, better than today. Come on. And let's make tomorrow, oh, better than today. Make it better. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Wachira Wagwastone on the drums, everybody. Thank you so much.
Leslie, thank you for stepping up so that Rick could have the day off. And I missed your name, but thank you for being here. What was his name? Wachira, so that Ricardo could be off today. And let's make tomorrow better than today, but let's make today awesome, okay? All right. So, in the beginning, God. I'm guessing you all recognize those words? Yes? They're the first words of the first chapter of Genesis, the first book of the Jewish Torah and the Christian Bible, the Old Testament. And they are how that creation story starts. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness, calling the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Genesis goes on to describe the creation of the sky or heavens, land to separate the oceans, vegetation and trees, the sun, moon, and stars, the sea creatures and birds, livestock, wild animals, and lastly, humans. And then God rested. With each act of creation, we are told God saw that it was good. Every other major religion has its own creation narrative. And while they differ in the details, what they have in common is that each recognizes a presence and power from which all creation originated and which continues to this day the creative process. And each also acknowledges that humans share in that creative power. We are indeed co-creators with that which created us. There are more words than I have time to list that are used to describe what the Bible calls God. And in fact, in the original Hebrew and Greek Bibles, there are many words for God. Here and now, we may call it the universe, the divine, consciousness, spirit, the absolute, presence, reality, not to mention all the names given to this same idea by various religions, Yahweh, Allah, Krishna, Christ, to name but a few. So let me just say this morning that if you have buttons sticking out about the word God, breathe. And I encourage you to translate it into what works for you, because it's going to get mentioned quite a few times today. I also encourage you to explore if there is healing you might want to do to allow that word to pass harmlessly through your mind going forward. I know that we have many stories in this room of spiritual wounding from past religious experiences, and I do assure you they can be healed. Our practitioners are here to help you do that, so that you can release any old hurts you have from your last and past and whatever religious experience you have, so that you can, in the here and now, have a new understanding and a new idea of relationship with that which created you. I promise you, you were not created by a judgmental old man in the sky who is keeping score like Santa Claus and who finds you lacking. That is not the God of which I speak this morning, and that is not God. While the Christian Bible describes God using male pronouns, in the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes calls the first section describing this presence the thing itself. Now, I'm told that that sounds like the title of a horror movie to some. But I think Holmes' intention was twofold. First, to find words with less baggage than the word God seems to have for many folks, and also to emphasize that there is much in science that supports spiritual truths. So to describe the thing itself, Holmes used words like first cause, creative power, absolute intelligence, invisible essence, ultimate stuff, spirit, universal conscious mind, law, substance, and sometimes just God. Holmes felt that it was essential, if we are to understand our place in the universe, to understand that the thing itself through which all creation occurs is both a God of love and a God of law, and that those two things cannot be separated. Divine love expresses itself. Creation continues through the uniting of presence and principle, love and law. Thought acting on substance to become form. The law of which we speak is not about rules to follow, but principles that exist, such as gravity, whether we believe them or not. I can say I don't believe in gravity, but if I fall off this stage, I will fall and hit the ground. As I did in the back some weeks ago. So some of you, I am here to testify gravity is real. So in the beginning, God, that's all. There was at first no form, only spirit, the life principle, which contained within itself the substance out of which all that has been created came from. Spirit makes things out of itself through an inner act upon itself, an act of consciousness, of self-perception and self-knowingness. And whatever God knows, becomes, exists, is. All that is, was, and ever will be begins as an idea in the mind of God, a thought that impresses itself on substance and then manifests in form. And we are not that different. Further on in Genesis, we read, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness.' So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. And God saw that all he had made, and it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day." I find it interesting that at each stage of the creation narrative, we're told that God saw that what was created was good until he created us. And then he pronounced it very good. I think that has something to do with having created something that had a consciousness that could recognize the presence of something greater than itself. Something that had the ability to consciously communicate and co-create with the Creator. A being that shared those same qualities of consciousness, of self-perception, and self-knowingness. A being that could also recognize and utilize presence and principle, love and law. A being that could utilize conscious thought to create things in form by intention, and not just through the instinct of mating, as other creatures do. The New Testament has more validation for our unique place in creation, though it has been widely misrepresented since 1054, when the Eastern and Western churches split, and the Western churches, the ones most of us are familiar with, lost sight of the universal Christ that Jesus embodied, and focused instead on the divinity of Jesus as special and unique, instead of his message of the universality of the presence of the resurrected Christ in all humans. John 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." I've been reading Richard Rohr's amazing book, The Universal Christ, in which he makes the case that the word mentioned in that first verse of John is the Christ, and that it existed since the beginning of creation. It was made manifest in a new way with the birth of Jesus, not for him to be different, but so that we might more clearly recognize and have a model for how to utilize it in our lives, and that the Christ continues to exist through us, through humanity, recognizing the truth of our unique place in creation and our oneness with the Creator. I highly recommend the book. And it teaches many of the same lessons as The Science of Mind does, only it uses very different language. It acknowledges that many of the native cultures that existed long before the birth of Jesus had a much greater awareness of their connection with the Creator and with creation than the Christian church has done, the Western Christian church. And that much of the damage that has been done to our planet is the consequence of Western Christianity's focus on Jesus as the great exception, as the Savior, instead of his role as an example to all of us for our potential as co-creators with divine consciousness and as stewards of the planet Earth. In preparing to speak today on Reverend Donald's recommendation, I watched a fascinating TED Talk by a cognitive scientist. It was about the nature of reality, which he called the greatest unsolved mystery of science. He demonstrated how evolution shows that we construct our reality from our own thoughts, that what we call reality which science currently says is space, time, and objects, is really a result of multiple complex processes that we perceive in our consciousness. He ended the talk not with conclusions, but more questions. Might what we call reality be a vast machine that causes our conscious experience? Donald liked that one a lot. The scientist, however, did doubt that explanation. He also asked, might it be a vast, interacting network of conscious agents, simple and complex, that cause each other's conscious experience? That scientist is actually currently exploring that with science. So what does all this have to do with in the beginning, God? No matter where I look to these last couple of weeks in preparing for the talk, whether the Science of Mind textbook, the creation narratives of many religions, Richard Rohr's book on the universal Christ, or into psychology and science, I found basically the same thing. That consciousness, expressing with intention, created all that is, and that we have the power to utilize that consciousness in our own lives. Our choice is whether to do so consciously and with purpose, or to do it unconsciously and carelessly. I found a few helpful clues in the materials I explored about what can help us in our co-creation process to create more of what we want to experience and less of what we don't. Perhaps you'll find those clues helpful as well. The first clue is the talk title, In the Beginning, God. Acknowledging the power and presence of our Creator and aligning ourselves with what we know to be true about the thing itself is the first step. It all starts with God and our recognition of its love and its law and how it goes about creating. Asking ourselves the question, is what I want to create loving and kind and for the highest good of all concerned? Asking if the process for doing so is in keeping with the law, which includes the law of cause and effect. God does not create out of nothingness, but out of the substance of its own being. What of our being are we putting into what we say we want to create? What effort, energy, material are we investing in what we would create? I'm reminded of the old joke of the guy who goes to heaven and berates God that he never won the lottery as he had prayed for every day. And God said, my hands were tied, you never bought a ticket. So the question is, are we doing our part in the co-creation process and not just praying? The next clue I noticed was that God called all it had created good. God did not sit in judgment of its efforts, did not complain about what came into being, did not discount what was by saying, it could have been better. God blessed everything it created and called it good. What would our lives be like if we did that? If we would call everything good. Not, it's good, but just simply, it's good. What if after putting our love and effort into something, we could see its perfection just as it is? Not as it is to be forever, but as it is, right here, right now, in the current moment. We are always growing and evolving perfectly if we but allow ourselves to recognize the perfection of now. The third clue I noticed was that creation is an act of self-perception and self-knowingness. All of the answers we seek ultimately lead us within, because it is through our self-awareness that we can effectively create. Without that, we are constantly looking outside of ourselves, blaming someone else or circumstances for whatever lack we experience, waiting for someone else to change to make my life okay. It never works. And most of us are old enough that we should have figured that out by now. That doesn't mean that we're not called to stand up to injustice or unkindness or lack in the world. But unless we do so consciously and with love at the same time that we're recognizing what is good in the world, we contribute to the problems rather than the solutions. The final clue I want to share came at the beginning of the 2nd chapter of Genesis, which says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." The final clue is creating Sabbath time in our lives, a time when we rest from our work in ways that truly nourish our souls, bring joy to our lives, nurture us away from those things that drain us or demand our attention. It has nothing to do with a particular day of the week, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with church or any other shoulds in our lives. In his wonderful book called Sabbath, Wayne Mueller talks about the Old Testament commandment in Exodus that says, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work." Mueller says that God commanded us to keep the Sabbath not for God's sake because he needed to be worshiped or whatever, but for our own sake. We cannot be productive in our creativity if we never stop, never put down our cell phones, never spend time alone with those who make our hearts sing, if we never truly rest. When I was working every Sunday, Monday was my Sabbath day. Other times it's been Saturday. And most folks knew not to expect emails to be returned, texts to be sent, calls to be answered. It was my time to unplug and care for myself so that I could do my ministry. Sometimes that involved dinner with friends, and sometimes it was just a day of solitude. But your Sabbath day may involve going to a concert, making love, catching a movie that you've been longing to see, or anything else that nourishes you and prepares you to go back to whatever work is yours to do. I do think it helps if there's at least some time alone with your Creator that day, since that is where it all begins. In the beginning, God. In Science of Mind, we teach that God is presence, everywhere present, the creator of all, including each one of us, who were created in its image and likeness so that we might also create our world. Each of us are individualized expressions of that one divine mind and heart, with unique gifts and talents that we are here to express creatively in the world. As we close today, I invite you to ask yourself, what are you being called to create and express? How is Spirit wanting to show up as you? What is holding you back from being all you were created to be? And what are you going to do about it today? I look out from this stage at each of you here, and I proclaim that what I see is good and very good. May the world be blessed by what you choose to create. Thank you. In the beginning, God. Out of its own self, out of a place that was without form, God spoke its word and brought all that is into being. The heavens and the earth, the waters, all the planets and stars that make up our amazing universe, the beautiful mountains we look upon, and each one of us. And as we know this truth about the Creator, we also know that we are each one with that Creator. And each of us has a unique message, a unique system of gifts and talents, a unique calling to express. And so as I know this truth of the oneness of God and the oneness of all of us here, I invite you to come forward, speak your heart's desire to our practitioners and allow them to know that truth for you until you can know it fully for yourself. So come forward now. How grateful I am that these prayers have been spoken. These prayers have begun. They are already complete in the mind of God. And we release them now into that law which does the work, knowing that it all happens perfectly. And so right now we allow it to be, as together we say, and so it is.